from 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for 2 hours of live stream writing accountability, followed by our half-hour Maxish Share What You Did wrap-up chat. So that starts at about 11, and sometimes it ends before 11:30, sometimes it ends after, depends on how ranty I'm feeling. And in case you're new to this live stream, the way that it works is, actually, before I say that, I do have to say, for people who aren't new to this stream, and in particular were here yesterday and particularly saw me lose my temper. I very out of it yesterday, stayed up much too late, was on the second day of my period, and so staying up too late and being much too active on the first day of my period, and so not actually being on the rise on the second day of my period because I was just in full recovery mode from all the shit of the previous day. I lost my temper as I struggled to just log off early because basically I needed to declare myself a sick day and just go back to bed, which I ultimately did, and I will talk about that more in the wrap-up chat, but I just wanted to briefly say that happened, and I was not mad at anyone watching. I was not mad at anyone chatting. I just, in retrospect, needed to set a particular rule and routine for myself and a little script for myself for in the future when something like that comes up, when I have to cut out early, either because an emergency situation comes up, like that time the fire alarm went off, or if I just finally come to the conclusion I am too under the weather to even sit here at my own desk right now. Having a spiel to just be able to get through that and assure people that anything they've put into the chat or are putting into the chat will be addressed the next day. That is in the works. I did not have that in place yesterday, and I'll go into more detail in that during the wrap-up chat. I'll go into more detail about that, and I will respond properly to all of the things that were in the chat yesterday that I was not supposed to be reacting to and yet was reacting to, and because I was in the state that I was not as neighborly as I would have preferred to have been, because my brain was too busy being all conscious mind versus subconscious mind, and my OCD was the part of me that was pushing me to react to the chat, while my conscious mind was like, log off, Rose, log off right now, not good. And for anybody who was like, what the hell, that's archived on YouTube. It's at the end of yesterday's video, but if you're whether old or new to the chat, the way this works is that the first 2 hours, 9 to 11, probably going to be 9:10 to 11 because it's 9:07 now as I'm going through this spiel. The way the stream is supposed to work when I don't lose my mind because of menstruation and staying up into the wee small hours of the morning, celebrating Pride with my friends, the way it's supposed to work is that you can keep the stream open in a separate window, separate tab, as background noise, as though we were in a shared digital workspace while you're working on your thing for 2 hours and I'm working on my thing for 2 hours. And then during those 2 hours, you are strongly encouraged to use the chat to keep a running log of what it is that you are getting done, what it is that you're working, what tasks you're completing, where you are in your word count. If you just want to duck in and update your word count as you go, that sort of thing. During the 2 hours, strongly encourage that if you're writing along during the 2 hours, digital workspace style, go into the chat, let me know what it is you're getting done. Now, if whether you're writing along or watching along, you're going to see that I work in a tabbed window. I'm not going to be able to see the chat, and that is by design, which again, yesterday I was not supposed to be looking at the chat as I was logging off. I was just supposed to log off. And so you can kind of see just how frustrating and difficult it is for me to be working a task and looking at the chat at the same time, especially when I'm under the weather. And so you can see here, I'm gonna be using a Google spreadsheet to keep a running log of the things that I complete rather than ducking into the chat and keeping that running, keeping a running log there. And then at 11 o'clock, when the live stream writing portion ends, I'm going to give a brief summary of what all I got done off of my running log, and then I'll duck into the chats to see your running log, and also whether you are watching along or reading along, if you have any comments or questions about your creative projects, my creative projects, or the creative process in general, I hope that you'll also log those into the chat as well. That way we can have a discussion of the creative process, because the more we can talk about what it is we're working on and how it is we're working on it, the more we can iterate on that how, and always make sure to be giving our best to our work. Just, again, part of the reason I logged off yesterday, I was not in a position to give my best. Womp womp. So, yeah, we got the chats open in separate tabs so I can't see them and they're not distracting me. I have here all the chatting that happened yesterday. And I will address that during the wrap-up chat later. And actually, I'm going to move this over here so I can't see it while I'm going back and forth into where I'm logging, getting things done, because like I can see it enough that I know I'm going to need to address it. But being able to see the words just then as I'm looking to start working on my writing for the morning was itself so distracting that I was having difficulty saying that. It was distracting just being able to see the chat from yesterday. So, the chat comments that I copy pasted from yesterday. So now it's time to get work done on the writing. Let's get work done on the writing. I know I need this time after my kerfluffle yesterday. supposed to be at 10:24. It's supposed to be right friggin' now.
destructive maintenance on the parking lot itself across the street from my building.
Fun times. Fun times. Oh, it's 11:10. Sorry. Ha 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 ha. That last paragraph in there got away from me in terms of time management. All right. So now that it is 11:10, it is time for the wrap-up chat, or it has been time for the wrap-up chat, and I was too caught up to notice. So the way the wrap-up chat works, in case you're new, is that first today I'm actually going to address what was in the chat yesterday, and that's what's over here. I had to duck out early yesterday because I was not feeling well, and I am going to discuss that. So first in the wrap-up chat, brief discussion about my not feeling well as I'm reacting to yesterday's chat. Then I'm going to do what I usually do, which is a brief summary of what all I got done based off of the log that I keep of what I do as I'm doing it. And then, I'm going to respond to all comments and questions in YouTube. So now, while I'm reviewing comments and questions from yesterday and then giving my brief summary for today, now is a good time, if you haven't already, to log into the chat if you were writing along, what it is that you were writing, getting done, working on, what you accomplished. Get that log of your own brief summary of how you spent the 2 hours, and, for mutual accountability. And then, my writer brain is coming back, but my speaking brain is still being figgledy just a little bit. I apologize for that. And then, that doesn't help. It's an interesting background noise for today. What you can also do, rather than just log what it is that you got done, you can also leave comments and questions about your creative projects, my creative projects, and the creative process in general. And those are the kinds of comments and questions that typically lend to the conversation topics that I log for the podcast that I'm going to be making, because my morning writing right now happens every day, but I got a new job and we're still working out what my work schedule over there is going to be, and so there is that possibility that I'm not going to be here writing every morning at this time because I have to be getting ready for work and going over there. And so that's going to shift my schedule and break things up, and also give me time for this new podcast project that will also act as a sort of resource library of all the things that we talk about with regards to the creative process. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But so please feel free to log any comments and questions about your projects, my projects, and the creative process in general now, and also to be logging what it is you got done during the 2 hours of morning writing, while I first respond to yesterday's comments and questions and then give my brief summary before looking at today's comments and questions. So, yesterday's comments and questions. All right. First from, Joe89 responded, "Hello, Rose. Made pancakes yesterday morning from scratch. Tastes better from a box. Maybe because you expected to taste better, but they were pretty good." There is some of that placebo effect, I am sure, but you also have more control, and the flour is more likely, and the ingredients are likely to be fresher when they're all interspersed and whatnot. And you have more control over what kinds of ingredients you're using. So if there's a particular flour that you like using, a particular kind of sugar or butter that you like using, that affects the taste as well. And you don't have control over that when it's from a box. So, your kitchen is, whatever scratch ingredients you have is going to be stocked with ingredients that you prefer. And that's going to always improve the taste of something when you're using the ingredients that you like to use, versus just this sort of blanket, one-size-fits-all thing So I prefer my pancakes from scratch as well. I actually have a recipe for baking pancakes, which is a little bit like deep frying the pancake rather than having the butter in the batter. You get the oven going and you melt the butter in a dish in a baking pan, and you mix up the batter while that's melting, and then you pour it into the hot, like boiling butter in your oven, and then you bake it for 20 minutes, and you get just this beautiful pancake bread thing. I use my bread baker to do it, and it's I'm a huge fan of it. Joe89 has been thinking about new ways to write. Thought about writing each paragraph of a chapter on an index card so it'll be easier to rearrange. That is a really good idea. That would also make for a really interesting experimental fiction if you wrote the pieces of a story on index cards and then people were able to basically shuffle the cards and it would be a new story every time. But that is how a lot of outlining works, is that people write the bare bones of the story on the note cards and then they arrange them before they write them. That way when they write them, because when you're writing through a story, right, when you have the outline and then you beef it out, that gives a continuity to the voice. Whereas if you're writing these individual paragraphs and then rearranging them, it's more of a collection of prose poems that are interlinked in telling a story if you're writing them individually like that. So whether it's like a story that can potentially be shuffled like a deck of cards so you don't know what order the story is being told in, which happens to people on accident when they listen to audiobooks of CDs on shuffle on accident. That's happened to a number of people I know. And it makes for a very interesting reading experience. But that is an interesting idea, the putting individual things on note cards in order to rearrange them. I've actually, my sister, specifically my foster sister, she was writing a paper and her teacher said that it was real disorganized. It needed, not really disorganized, it just needed better organization because her paper, it was a paper and it had these sections and subsections to it, but she kept within each section referring to other sections in such a way that it broke up the flow. And so she asked me for my advice, and I was reading it and I was like, I can't like give you all the notes that I want to give you about rearranging this paper in this format because there's so much that needs rearranged. Really? I was like, yeah, we're printing this out and we're gonna cut it with scissors. And she was terrified. It's like, we're not deleting anything, it just needs rearranging. And I cut up the paragraphs and then I would cut between the sentences in order to rearrange where sentences belong, because she would just stick them randomly in some of these paragraphs. And she would ask me what I was doing. It's like, you want to take your reader on a journey. It's, you know, the paper is organized, but when you're in a section of the paper and then all of a sudden there's this idea that links to this other thing, that's confusing your reader. And so, you know, we printed out the story, cut it up into pieces, and then I showed her how to rearrange what she already had so that she had to do minimal rewriting. It was mostly cut and paste the various sections of her paper into something new, into a new order, and then tweaking just a few phrases to reconnect the flow of the paper where some breaks had been made. And her teacher ended up being very impressed with that paper, and she had been terrified about how that paper was going to affect how her teacher was going to react to it, because she said repeatedly she had never seen anyone take a work of writing, cut it into pieces, and then rearrange it, which sometimes you have to do. I take too much time organizing things in my head before they even touch the paper. Like, I'm imagining cutting things in my head before they hit the paper. So it's like, oh, I do this all the time, except not with actual paper. So It is an interesting way to get things done. It has many different uses and many different iterations, many different versions of having things on individual note cards, note card writing, and scissors. I'm just gonna write that note to myself for when the episode happens eventually. So, Joe then said that he was editing a short story a few hours before the morning writing yesterday. He's in a different time zone. Having written something and forgetting about it and then reading it again is brutal. You start questioning your past self. That is that is 100% true. I work. That's part of the reason I have built up the habit that I have of sort of hyper self-editing. You're told all the time never to self-edit. You are told all the time never to self-edit, and it is a worthy thing to learn to do, to just get something written and then go back and edit it. You want to and then go back and edit it. And that is very useful. Somebody once mentioned here that I should be able to see the chat so that people can tell me things that maybe I might want to edit. And I was like, no, I'm already editing in my head as I go, and I'm going to be editing again after I've written it this first time through. If I have my writing voice and my editing voice and your conversation voices and your editing voices all in my head at once, no. I have OCD. The answer to that is no. That will not be happening in my work. I will not be. I cannot work like that. So, and then Joe followed up on that it was a rough draft piece, so not too upset. And that's another thing, is just in editing yourself. I'm losing track of the things I'm saying. I can already tell. All right. So I have a habit of hyper self-editing, and so when I do go back and look at things much later, I do question it. But it tends to be, I've noticed that my writing style and my writing quality, at least as I perceive my writing quality, right, has altered so much over the years that I've gotten into a rhythm of figuring out how to write something exactly the way it needs to be said in that moment, and in such a way that later when I read it, I can remember why I wrote it that way and have better acceptance of what I wrote then, and let it be what it was, because that's what it needed to be in that moment, and let just the words be as present as they can be, so that when I'm looking back, I can see. Is there any more cocoa in my cup? No, there is not, but it's fine. But I have old essays, actually, that I've kept from college, because there were learning to get into your own writing groove in such a way that you just learn to accept the things that you have already written, and learning to let things be done when they are done, whether they're done because you've just finished polishing it or just because you finished writing it. There are very few poems, for instance, that I've written, or even articles. I mean, you see me on here and I'm writing, and I just get the thing through, and I'm basically editing as I go, and then I'm just kind of done, which is more me having trained myself not to do multiple edits of a thing. Even though you're encouraged to do multiple edits, I know that if I'm in the brain state step, if I'm in the headspace of, oh, I'm going to be writing multiple copies of it, I'm going to be able to have multiple drafts of it, I'm not going to get it done. And so I kind of trained myself to do things on, you get one shot at doing this and you do have to do it. You have to do something. And if you don't like it, you can write something new after you have written this thing. But this thing needs to get written, and it needs to be done. And I'm all over the place responding to that. I apologize. So rereading past work and questioning yourself, multiple drafts versus one draft. I should write a little thing on that and be more organized talking about it on the podcast. Multiple drafts versus one draft. Many of my poems are one draft. Most of what I write is like one draft and then editing. Because the more I open myself up to the possibility of various drafts, the harder it is to hit publish, the harder it is to turn it in. So many stories attached to that. Joe89 noticed that said that something outside must have hypnotized me. No. No, it's the window is the white space. It's not so much that something out there has my attention, it's that I'm looking out there because there really isn't anything to focus my attention on, except, today with the construction going on in the parking lot across the street, the intermittent noises coming from there. But that's mostly, the white noise. People on the street, walking, talking, the bus is going by, an emergency vehicle going by, which happens regularly enough that it's background noise now. It's just, that's my white space, like, sound machine over there that, it's more about focusing my mind and clearing my mind than it is about being hypnotized. And I stared out the window a lot yesterday, struggling to focus in on just one thing to write for my goddamn blog post yesterday before it ended up being a post about I'm taking a sick day. Joe89 said that he cut his finger the day before yesterday on a mandolin slicer, just a little nick, while trying to make potato chips. Mandolin slicers are friggin' terrifying, and I feel for you. Joe said that his short story is about a woman who storms out of the house and takes her husband's boat, gets lost, almost drowns, and meets a merman. It's an erotica. Sweet. Joe says, I guess it's pretty hard coming up with a new post. Don't worry, the inspiration will come, the planets will align, and the magic will flow through your fingertips. I believe I started addressing this yesterday because it was around the time that I decided to... I was logging off and I saw it. It wasn't about inspiration. As I said just now, I don't look out the window for inspiration. I look out it for focus. If I'm looking for inspiration, you'll see me reading things. You'll see me pull up something on the phone, usually the dictionary, because some word has caught in my head and I'm trying to look at the definition and see if there's something I can build off of there. When I need inspiration, I look to specific items and things and other people's words, and I look for a thing to focus on. When I'm looking out the window, that's not inspiration. That's, I have things in my head and I'm trying to release some of those thoughts basically out the window and see what will stay on this side of the glass is basically what's going on there. But when it comes to finding inspiration, I don't typically find it looking out the window. If I'm out in nature, enjoying nature, inspiration comes, certainly, because I'm interacting with nature. But there's glass between me and the world right now. Like, if I was to find inspiration with anything, it would actually be the experience of looking through the window itself rather than anything that's going on outside the window, which might get a mention, but it would not be the source of the inspiration. It would be the fact that there's this wall between us and there is light that comes through and I can see through it. But that's about focusing. on this side of the glass is the focus. What's on the outside of the glass is is white noise, things I don't need to be worried about. In just a second, I need to handle. Ha! Gotcha. Sorry, it's spring, so spiders and such in the apartment. And Witch's Door commented, time for writing things. Was very happy that Witch's Door was around yesterday, getting their own writing done. And yeah, so here I am now in the part of the chat where, from yesterday, where I started wrapping up early. Joe said, wait, you're doing the wrap up already? Something going on? Is it just one of those days? I made a comment about singing more show tunes than I needed to the day before yesterday. And Joe made a joke about that being draining. Joe said that he, too, tends to use a lot of energy socializing because he is introverted. And that is true. I use, when you are introverted, I myself am as well, I appear extroverted because I've built up the muscle memory of appearing extroverted. Introversion, drain, acting, extroverted. So extroversion is, the extroversion posturing is very tiring when you are naturally introverted. And also I have OCD, which means I am compelled to be more extroverted sometimes. And it's very hard to know when I am being extroverted as muscle memory, as a way of moving through a space and getting through that space, or if it's a compulsion keeping me in place, which is actually why I was out as late as I was on Pride, because which led to yesterday's kerfluffle. The day before yesterday was the first day of my period, so I was completely drained and having a hard time focusing, just did administrative things. And then I went and I performed with my chorus in Connecticut. And then I went to my friend's house and we were shooting the shit and I was just singing show tunes. And then we came downtown and she went to our friend's place where we were going to meet up, and I went back to my place just to change into my purple corset for Pride. And then I met up with them, and then I stayed up till the wee small hours of the morning. It was not a laid back kind of a day. It just was not. And there was a point in the evening where I started noticing that I was falling asleep. And it's a thing that when I'm socializing with someone and I'm falling asleep like that, I'm generally at the point where my OCD is going to be kicking in, and it's going to keep me where I'm at. Because the biggest muscle memory history I have with regards to nodding off like that is in being in social situations where A, there isn't a place for me to go sleep, or B, there is a place for me to go sleep, but I can hear people from where I'm sleeping, and I'll wake up again. Well, I can hear actual conversations of people I care about having from where I would be sleeping, and I wake up and I'd wake up and I would cry. And so rather than be lying in bed crying because, that's one of the 3 panic attack types I have. I have quiet, I have crying, and I have anger. And so I can either be in OCD mode among people nodding off, or I can be in those moments when I have a place that I can go sleep, but I can hear people who I care about talking. My options are just be slightly nodding off around the people that I care about, and potentially slightly grumpy or very grumpy, as the case may be, depending. Usually in the situation where the bed is nearby, it's a grumpy situation. If there's no bed nearby, I'm more readily cheerful. It's like, oh, it's not like I can go to bed anyway. My bed's all the way over there, whatever. But if my bed is nearby, but I know I'd be able to hear people, then I can be around people and be grumpy, or I could be by myself and crying because the sound of these voices that I know and trust is waking me up. It's causing my OCD to wake me up and want to be near them, and it's freaking me out that I'm not around them and then I'm crying, or I can be around them and I can be slightly annoyed with them that I can't sleep. And I tend to default to stay around them and be grumpy, because otherwise I'm like, either way I'm going to be not sleeping, and either way I'm going to be upset. But in one version I'm getting dehydrated, and in the other, typically I'm in my parents' kitchen and I'm drinking water, so I'm hydrating rather than dehydrating. So these are my options. And where we were a couple of blocks away from the apartment, and I knew that if I could get to the apartment, it'd be fine, even though there was a huge party in the street below from a nearby gay bar, celebrating Pride very joyfully, very loudly. The thing was, it would just be so much blanket noise that I wouldn't be able to make out the sounds of anybody I know or care about, and so there wouldn't be those individual voices that would wake me up. But because of the distance away, and because of how tired I was, and because I didn't have the muscle memory of, you can walk a couple blocks back to your apartment, my brain went to that default of, oh, I'm not really in a position to just like go off into another room and fall asleep. Like it was too long of a distance to walk by myself at that level of tiredness. Not because I was scared, but because of just how tired I was. I needed, my OCD was keeping me anchored there rather than having any kind, and there was no momentum toward my apartment. I was constantly and I started, and as I nodded off, watching my friends, trying to see, all right, who's going where, who's doing what, and finally the night started to disperse. One set of friends said they were going to go get a calzone. I was like, I don't think they're going to go by my apartment, so I'm not going to go with them. The other ones was like, oh, we're calling a Lyft, and they started typing right from where they were, so the Lyft was there in a couple of minutes, right next to the bar where we were at. I was like, all right, so they're not walking past my apartment. And then my friend, who's also my neighbor in the building next door, she and a few other friends were going to go back to her place, and because it's next door to mine, I was like, yes, I'm going to walk with them. And so when she got up to leave, I to leave too, and then and she's my best friend, so she knew that she could say this to me, but she thought I was getting up just to keep hanging out with her, because I was starting to get quieter and quieter, because again, my OCD was in control, and if my OCD is in control, that means I'm in a panic attack mode, and I wasn't in grumpy mode, and I wasn't in weepy mode, so I was in quiet mode. And I was like, oh, so in my head, she gets up to leave, so I get up to leave, and she like puts her arm around me, she's all quiet, and she's like, I have friends that I just want to hang out with that I haven't hung out alone with in a while. I was like, oh yeah, 100%, I get it. I'm just going home because you're headed in that direction. She said, oh, cool. And I didn't say anything beyond that because I was so sleepy, and in quiet mode, I speak much less. Quiet panic attack mode, I'm speaking much less, and it was still kind of a happy panic attack because, I'm finally on my way home. It hadn't reached a point where I was freaking out about the fact that I couldn't get myself to leave of my own volition. There had been a moment of freak out, and I was like, eventually, your best friend, who's also your next door neighbor, is going to be headed in that direction, and if she tries to head in another direction, you could at least, you can say to her, I need to get home, and could you just walk at least part of the way with me so I have the momentum to get me in that direction? And you can ask her that, and it'll be okay. And when I said that, then I was anchored, and then I was basically just waiting for her to get up and move, and for there to be that in to say to her, I'm just walking with you, I'm not going to keep hanging out with you tonight, which she inadvertently provided by saying, I don't want to hang out tonight. It's like, great, I don't either. but it was weird. I could not get home. I could not get to sleep, and I partly did that to myself, and I partly um, was just subject to my obsessive compulsive disorder holding me in place, and I was still recovering from that exhaustion and that panic attack still being in my system, that lack of control still being in my system, when I went to do my morning writing yesterday and was live streaming with you. So we have here in these last two comments from yesterday, that's my last comment, and I hope you're not angry at me, from Joe, because I made the mistake of looking at the chat as I was trying to log off early. What I should have done was just have a written spiel about logging off early that I can, and I'm working on one. I'm drafting one that I can use when the fire alarm goes off, because that's happened here before. Fire alarm went off and I had to leave the morning writing early, and I copy pasted comments like I did yesterday when I came back from the run downstairs during the fire alarm, and I made the mistake of looking and trying to do my wrap-up spiel while it was in view, and Joe kept commenting, and that was triggering my OCD, which was already like proactively on its own fighting for control of my actions. And so my logical willpower conscious mind was just trying to get off the computer, and then I would see the chat going, Joe continuing to comment to what I was proactively saying in my early wrap-up chat yesterday, and it was just getting my OCD going. So I'm going to have a spiel for the future to avoid that from happening. And I ended up yelling because I was so frustrated with not being able to turn off the goddamn chat and stop reacting to it and stop looking at it. And I eventually just started holding my hands over my face when I was yelling. And that holding my hands over my face so I couldn't see the chat was when I realized, oh, it's because I can see it. Right, Rose? This is why we don't look at the chat while we're doing morning writing. We have it in separate tabs so we can't see it, so it's not triggering the OCD. You need to get it off screen and out of view. So and that yell was the procreative instinct, where you get defensive of your boundaries. That part of my brain was rebelling against the OCD. So I was yelling at myself. And that's something I've done a lot over the years, is I'm yelling in order to hear my conscious thoughts over my OCD, and also over any voices that might be going on outside of me from family, friends, whatever. Because voices outside plus voices inside, it's a lot. So trying to command silence by raising my own voice is something that I've instinctually done for years, and have recently figured out that that's what I'm doing, that I'm trying to drown out my OCD, and I'm trying to get anyone who's proactively talking to me and taking my attention away from me doing what I need to do, just getting them to stop. And there you so you have in those last two comments, that's my last comment, and then a follow-up comment, which, don't say that's my last comment and then comment again. The way that triggers OCD can be so infuriating. And not infuriating because I was mad at you. I was not mad at Joe. My procreative instinct was furious with, my procreative instinct was standing up for my physical instinct. Because my OCD, latched to my social survival instinct, was insisting that I take care of you and take care of the chat before taking care of me. It's no. So part of the spiel in the future, if something like that ever happens again, is that I'm not going to look at the chat during the wrap-up spiel. I'm going to instead, I'm going to instead just do the wrap-up spiel, log off the stream and then copy paste the chat from the stream, because I can still have access to it after the stream has ended. That's what happened with the fire alarm. I was able to get, I was still able to access the chat after the stream had ended, and do that so that I can, like today, respond to the chat the morning after. So now that I've responded to yesterday's chat and give a little bit about my 3 panic attack types, which are weepy, quiet, and angry. The weepy one wanting me to be around people, the angry one wanting me to stand up for myself, the quiet one wanting me to just get through this moment until I can go someplace and do what I need to do. So it's like the quiet one is like my physical survival instincts are in control, procreative's in control when I'm angry, and weepy is my social in control, with lots of crossover between the sleepy and the quiet, with interjections from the angry on those few times that I have been grumpy and unable to leave a social situation. So that's yesterday's wrap-up chat handled. Today's wrap-up chat begins with my brief summary of what I got done, which was my daily blog post, which is a little bit about how nice it was to take that sick day yesterday, and how much, and a touch of how annoyed I was with myself for not having a spiel ready to go in the event of being under the weather like that, which won't be the case in the future. Then I queued up my next buffer postings, which included, yes, the buffer posting that would have gone out yesterday, because one didn't go out yesterday because I was fighting to log off the live stream instead. And then today, being, you know, what is usually my rest day, I rotate my journaling prompts in the Golden Goose Eggs Facebook group, which you can find at bit.ly/thegoldengoose.com. New journaling prompts go out every 4 days, and I have them queued up so that there's journaling prompts, like the next 7 journaling prompts, so the next 4 weeks of journaling prompts are ready to go at all times. And then I worked on the Hans Christian Andersen article, and man, I worked on it like a beast. Look at this. Look at this. I've got the introduction section. I've got section 2. I've got section 3. And now I'm on to like a section 4, and I'm probably going to wrap it up here in section 4 this afternoon. So I am going to leave this tab open when I log out of things today, because I do want that article to post tomorrow morning. My articles for the Golden Goose Eggs are supposed to post every 20 days, and tomorrow is supposed to be Hans Christian Andersen article day. So, so that's going to go out there. And then I'll hopefully tomorrow be working on the boon that will emphasize that article, which is going to be a rewriting of Palmistry for Every Man, only I'm going to call it Palmistry for Every Day. And it's going to be using the ideas behind palm reading to actually use your hands as a sort of metaphorical map of, all right, who am I and who do I want to be, and how am I mapping that out based on the different lines and mounds of your hands, basically kind of drawing the hands that you want, basically your internal hands rather than your external hands, because this is genetics. I have various feelings about palm reading. I don't really believe in it as fortune telling, but as a way of understanding maybe something from past lives that interests me. That maybe somehow that's crept into the text. You might call your fingerprints and your lines and your mounds, but whether or not, like, how actively it's a part of your day-to-day life, I don't really know entirely how I feel about that yet, but I'm going to work on a little booklet. It'll be much thinner than this, and it'll be a little download about about, yeah, mapping out your life based on the things that you value. So now that I've given you the wrap-up chat from yesterday and today's brief summary, it is now for today's response to all comments and questions on YouTube and Twitch. So let's see what we got going here on YouTube. Nothing. No worries. That is pretty standard. Most of our chatting happens here on Twitch. And look, we got stuff here on Twitch. And it's Joe from yesterday. Great. I hope you saw me responding to all your stuff from yesterday. So Joe says, hello, hope you're feeling good today. I am. I'm feeling so much better. Like, look at this. There's a reason I titled today's blog post, What a Difference a Day Makes, because I feel so much better having spent yesterday just vegging out, sleeping till lunch, like getting off of here, going back to bed, sleeping till lunch, and then spending the rest of the day just snacking on oatmeal and watching shitty TV. It was very necessary. Today, Joe made pancakes from scratch again and doesn't think he can go back to the pre-made box stuff. I think you're right. Maybe the extra effort makes the taste better, as weird as that might sound. There is that like sense of accomplishment definitely that feeds into appreciating real homemade food more than the instant stuff. That's actually part of the reason when they first started making cake mixes. When they first sold cake mix, the only thing you had to add was water. And nobody bought it. And then they made it that you had to add the water and eggs, and I think possibly also the butter or oil. And they made it so you had to add 3 ingredients rather than just 1. And then it sold. There has to be a minimum level of effort for people to feel that it's real, that it's something that they need. Because if you're adding 1 ingredient and then baking, like, it just didn't make sense to them. And microwaves weren't hugely popular then, so the idea of just heating a thing, and it just didn't make sense in terms of cooking that you would only add 1 ingredient. What? How is that possible? Anyway, Joe put agave syrup in his coffee and doesn't even drink coffee. Most writers that he follows on Twitter swear by it. He's just drinking it like, meh, when does it kick in? I'm not a real coffee drinker. I only drink coffee, and it's a very tiny amount. Like, they tell you how much on the instant coffee thing, how much to put per cup. Scratch versus instant. There's a thing that they put on the instructions for using instant coffee, and it tells you how much to use per cup, and I use significantly less per cup because I'm actually only drinking the coffee so that it will boost my metabolism before my morning workout. And when there's caffeine in your system, it helps tell your body that there's so much energy being burned in your body that, oh, we need to break down the fat cells. We need to make use of this stuff. So in the morning, when I have energy and I'm not likely to crash from it, tiny bit of coffee, and then the rest of that morning beverage is actually my cocoa mix. And the drink that I made for myself just a little while ago was actually my usual peppermint tea sweetened with my hot cocoa mix. So I'm not much of a coffee drinker either, mostly because the caffeine can drive me nuts, which is another reason I do it before my exercise, because I can use up as much of the caffeine as possible with my morning exercise, and then get to the writing and I'll have a clear head without the caffeine driving me nuts. Because, you know, OCD, the obsessive part is that your brain just isn't turning off. You can't stop thinking. And when you add caffeine to that, it makes it so much worse. So much worse. Oh my God. Like, I've rolled around on the floor crying and like knocking myself in the head. It hurts so much worse. It's not great. So there are specific times a day also that I just completely avoid caffeine, because otherwise I want to die. Joe says that whenever he finds a person online who's from his state, he's like, whoa, this person is close to me doing this stuff in real life, right? It's amazing. It's hilarious. Joe says for the first time, he's actually working on a piece of writing while I also work. Nice. Yay, being accountable for the first time. Go, Joe. And Joe says he mentioned the story yesterday, which I did address in the comments that I reread today. And he also spent time creating tweets, too. Felt like a writing fiend today, unless Twitter doesn't count as writing. Twitter totally counts as writing anywhere that as long as you're building a body of work. If you are being, you're building up your Twitter in order to be proactive about it. If you're trying to build up Twitter as the place that you want people to be able to interact with you proactively online, then having a body of work there is important. So continuously tweeting there in order to encourage people to find you online in that particular mode 100% counts, as long as when you have your little Twitter profile blurb, you have it focused on you as a writer, and then your link goes to your primary writer site. So you want any social media that you have or any blog that you have pointing toward wherever you want your core audience to be, preferably email. Current research regarding the publishing industry, whether it's self-publishing or traditional publishing, it's really important to build your email list as a writer. So have everything pointing in that direction. That's why I built project pages for all the things that I've created on my site, so that everything points back to better storytelling, hopefully building that list, hopefully building up to being able to make a go of self-publishing, or in the very least having an audience behind me to encourage traditional publishers to take a chance on my work. So, use of social media for publishing. Put that in my notes. Joe says, this is funny, you responding to my yesterday comments. Let me find Joe from yesterday. He'll want to listen to this. You're welcome, Joe. Joe said, oh, I think I saw the anger panic mode. Fuck, she shouts. Yeah, I did. I yelled fuck when I realized that I was not able to stop myself from responding to yesterday's comments, and I really needed to stop responding to them. But yeah, a lot of times yelling is mostly it's mostly my my procreative instinct telling my OCD to shut up. It's like, we get it. Social survival is essential, but that's not our focus right now. We're supposed to be focusing on this thing. You shut your face and get out of the way. Like, it's not your turn. Take turns. Joe says, I could collect a compilation of my sassy tweets and make a book. Who'd buy it, though? Rose? They're pretty sassy. The sass is layered on thick. There are lots of people who focus their tweets as being a specific thing, and that is the only thing they tweet in that particular profile, and they do make books out of it. Shit My Dad Says was a Twitter, somebody just tweeting all the weird things that his dad was saying, and then he made it into a book, and he got so many followers that he collected those sayings into a book, and then that book spawned a very short-lived television show starring William Shatner as the dad saying the shit. Part of the reason I think it was so short-lived was because they were doing it sitcom style, and they were doing it on one of those primary networks. Like, I can't remember if it was ABC or CBC or CBS. I think it was ABC. And so you can't swear as much as the dad who is saying all the shit on Twitter was saying. And so it didn't have that same level of edge. I think it would have been much better if they had found a way to turn it into a web series. But at the time, a lot of these broadcasters were still trying to figure out how webcasting can be integrated into their production efforts. So I think it was just the wrong medium for Shit My Dad Says, because it should be short, it should be pithy, it should be ridiculous. I don't think sitcoms on a family-friendly channel was the best place for Shit My Dad Says. And I have a friend I met very recently who he just posts the most ridiculous things on Twitter. Is it Lufus? I gotta show you this. Lufus? I think it's Lufus. Yes, there it is. Lufus. He specifically just tweets the most ridiculous things. Me to the parking attendant. Do you validate? Attendant, yes. Everything you are going through is normal. And he just... Two closed don't make an open is a tweet. Another tweet is, on one hand, what the fuck? Mugger, pointing gun. Give me your fucking wallet. Me, why don't you have a seat? Mugger, what? Me. Tell me where it all began. Mugger, taking a seat hesitantly. Me. Go on. Mugger. When I was 7, my dad said he was going to take us to Chuck E. Cheese for my birthday and forgot. And like, imagine you got married only to discover your man tied the bread bag like shoelaces. Double knot. Oh, fuck my life if that happened in real life. But yeah, it's just this completely Whom's Twixt. At Whom's Twixt is his Twitter account. And he just tweets this ridiculous shit. But I've talked to him that he should... He doesn't have a lot of followers, but when he does, I'm like, we need to have your book ready when you do have a lot of followers so they can be exposed to, like, your really early Twitter shit. Joe says, I can't think of anything else to write and chat. You're just devouring my comments today. Reminds me of a scene from Avatar, Legend of Korra. One character was so angry and stressed, so she did acupuncture and later passed out. When she woke up, she was cheery. Like she was a whole different person. Have you ever watched Avatar, The Last Airbender, or The Legend of Korra? I have not watched Avatar. I have heard of them and am interested in seeing them. But yeah, when you're not feeling good, that is one of the ways that your brain forces you to take time out for yourself and take care of yourself. Yeah. But it was also kind of like a one. Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to worry about writing things in chat to come up with things to say during the chatting, because eventually we do have to wrap up. And in fact, because of making up for yesterday's time, we weren't making up for yesterday's chat. We ended up going right into and all the way through the buffer time that I have built in to when I like the wrap-up chat to end. And we've actually gone beyond that buffer by another 20 minutes now. Like, I give myself a 15-minute buffer. We're 20 minutes over that, which makes sense given making up for yesterday. But, Joe says you should def watch Avatar. They're the best animated shows of the century. That's just a fact. I'm gonna have to reserve comment until I've seen them. I really am gonna have to reserve comment until I've seen them, because it's not... The animation isn't just it's... I believe I spoke before. I know I've spoken about this before. How important it is that if you're going to have the written word paired with imagery of any kind, they should work together. Whether you're picking photography that works with your imagery or illustrations that work with your imagery, a lot of children's book publishing, it really hinges on finding that perfect blending. And every now and then, you get something that just doesn't actually work. This particular boxed set of the Enchanted Forest Chronicles is such an issue. Now, this particular image works, mostly. This dragon looks super unimpressed with her, and she looks like she's super braggy, which is not what was going on in that moment. She was being very professional. She was being a very courteous princess. There wasn't this arm-crossing thing. Like, there was a dragon who in the cave with another dragon in the cave with them. And they had a cold and was constantly sneezing, and she happened to have 7 kerchiefs with her, so she kept handing them kerchiefs to wipe their nose and whatnot. Like, she's a very courteous princess. Like, she did not have a lot of attitude when she went to the dragons. She just didn't want to go through an arranged marriage. So she said, I'll go pretend to be eaten by dragons and actually just go live among them. And so that was what she did. And it was really, really great. So that's supposed to be the moment where they're first meeting, except the way they're looking at each other, the way they're postured is not great. It doesn't actually reflect them, even though that is what she was wearing, that is how she had her hair. And then you have on this cover, Searching for Dragons, like, this battle scene takes place, but the adventuring clothes that they have on these covers does not fit what is actually described in the book. It is more fairy tale fantasy-esque clothing. It is not so, Roman Viking crossover warrior suchness. And also the way she has her hair, that's not what his hair is described as in the book. He is not meant to look like a Viking at all. He is the prince of the Enchanted Forest, well, the king almost. And she does not go around battling in her tiara. And also she does not wear her hair down like that when she goes out and about. She only has her hair down when she's trying to look professional and impressive and regal and is going to, like, a quiet thing where she needs to look stately. Any other time, when she's doing housework around the cave, when she's reorganizing the dragon's library, when she goes battling to find her dragon after it gets kidnapped, she goes questing, not dressed like that. And the way she has her hair is actually more like this. She braids it in a crown around her head, which is actually why I learned to braid my hair in a crown around my head, was because I love these books so much. But this particular edition of the series does not actually reflect what the characters look like or how they behave. That it's like the amount of attitude, the way the amount of edge they give her. Like, she's a tomboy, but it's more of a girl next door tomboyishness. And it's just very frustrating the way that they're portrayed in this. And that's something that's really important in anime as well, is that when you're telling a story, the visuals have to match the story that you're telling. Anime is typically very, very solid about it, and the hyperbole in the mannerisms of the cartoons is something that I very much enjoy, because there is a particular kind of storytelling that has evolved with anime, so that there's a very particular way that the characters move and that the characters are drawn, and so there is this concert between them that I really, really enjoy. But every now and then there is an anime where something was off in what they were doing, and it's just not great. One anime that I love that is ridiculous. It's ridiculously good, and you don't want to take it seriously when you first find out about it. You don't want to take it seriously because the name in English, and I think also, I think actually this is the proper name of it. It's called Princess Tutu. Have you ever heard of Princess Tutu? It's this duck who's given a magical necklace in order to turn into a girl and attend a ballet school. And then the necklace can also turn her into this kind of swan princess type character, Princess Tutu. And it sounds like, even just that explanation I've given sounds ridiculous, but they're going through all these really interesting there's so many layers of meta narrative going on. It's so many layers of fairy tale. The whole series is one long fairy tale with Drosselmeyer from the Nutcracker as the villain, and then she is, when she's in Princess Tutu form, is dressed in a costume that is basically the character of Odette. So you have two Tchaikovsky references right there off the bat, even though Drosselmeyer isn't originally a villain in the Nutcracker. He's just kind of a catalyst, and which villains so often are, primarily a catalyst to keep things moving. And the beauty of facing your story and working your way through the story, and it has all these battles that are these really beautiful dance fights that are set to classical ballet music, and the music is always paired with what's going on in the story of that episode. That particular fairy tale they're focusing on is linked to these different ballets, and specifically these little bits of ballet music that were dealing with similar themes in that work, and the marriage between the music and what's going on in the story, and then the visual elements of the story, and then her name her name is Akiro. When she's a girl, she is Akiro, which means duck, I believe, based off the way that the subtitles and dubbing, because I've watched both versions, because I'm a dork, based on how that works. I believe Akiro means duck, and there's this other character named Fakir who, she's super interested in this prince character whose heart she's trying to piece together by solving all these fairy tale mysteries to find the pieces of his heart and put them back together in him. And so she begins focused on him, and then over the course of the story becomes more focused on Fakir, whose job it is to protect him, but also has this sort of storyteller power, so that he then is able to work with Princess Tutu. She's going through the fairy tale battles, but he then is able to actually write the story of the prince and influence the way it will ultimately turn out. And the levels of the storytelling fucking kill me. And a friend of mine put me onto the show, and after I emailed her and lost my mind via email about how crazy good the show was, she immediately emailed me a picture of some fan art that was rendered so well I thought it was actual art from the show. I was like, is there a sequel? Is there a sequel? Is there a sequel where they make it work? Oh my god, I want the sequel! I lost my mind. It's so fucking amazing. That is the best anime I have ever seen. It's, in my opinion, it is the best anime. Just all the levels and all the stories. Oh god, it kills me. It's got some Scheherazade level shit going down. It even uses the Scheherazade music in some very appropriate places, given the Fakir character. Joe says, I want to talk about how to write good openings for stories. Don't want to keep you on longer than you want to be. Then let's peg opening stories for tomorrow. I'll make a note of it here in the brief summary section. Opening stories. because my second alarm has gone off, which means it's actually time for me to start making my lunch. So we've gone well beyond buffer time. We've gone over by 45 minutes. Wait, no, we've gone over the buffer by half an hour. We've gone over the traditional morning writing time by 45 minutes. So, make my lunch on stream. Dude, no. No. I'm going to make my lunch and listen to podcasts because making my lunch is part of how I transition into my afternoon routines. So I'm not going to make my lunch on stream. Kidding. Oh, okay. But now you know. Now you know. It's part of my routine for getting into my afternoon, which I need to do in order to finish writing the Hans Christian Andersen article before tomorrow, or at least get down to the end so I can just put finishing touches tomorrow and then hit publish. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead. One last check on YouTube. Still no one over there. That's cool, because now it is time for the wrap-up chat. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm Roaster Music, your live stream writing accountability partner, here every morning from 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for 2 hours of live stream writing accountability, followed by our half-hour Max Says Share What You Did wrap-up chat-ish, because, you know, today you got an extra 45 minutes in. So, yeah, thank you very much for joining me today, and I highly encourage you to come back in the future, leave all the comments about your creative projects, my creative project, and the creative process in general, because the more we can talk about what it is we're working on and how it is that we're working on it, the more we can iterate and little by little be always telling better stories. Whether it's stories we tell ourselves, stories we're telling each other, or stories we're telling together as a society, a collective, a community. And it's my hope that we can build a better world through better storytelling. So please join me in the future. Let's keep having more discussions. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'll see you soon. Good journey, my friends.